Happy Halloween month, everybody, and Tony here with my review of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde with conductor Peter Popelka, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. This marks the third time I saw Sir Graham Vick's production of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde at the Deutsche Oper Berlin because I wanted to see and hear Tareq Nazmi perform the role of King Marke. I've been following Mr. Nazmi's career for nearly over a decade. I first remember him singing in a lot of character parts, such as Albert from Alevis la Juive, and these days he has been conquering a whole lot more leading man roles, such as Orovesso from Norma and Il Commendatore from Mozart's Don Giovanni, and tonight's performance of King Marke from Wagner's Tristan und Isolde. When I first heard him as Albert from La Juive, live from the Bayerische Staatsoper back in 2016, I affirmed that this was a basso cantante / profondo with a brilliantly virile voice that was round, rich, and absolutely amazing, with a brilliant future ahead of him. And here he is today, exercising his best future yet as King Marke. As I heard him tonight, his voice sounded rich, voluminous, round, cavernous, and absolutely magnetic from top to bottom. He definitely involved himself in the text and the music and ensured that his technique was rock steady and outstandingly excellent. What I seem to notice about Tareq Nazmi is that he is following a similar direction toward the basso cantante / basso profondo repertoires, with such singers such as Alexander Kipnis, Ezio Pinza, Tancredi Passero, Kim Borg, Jerome Hines, Giorgio Tozzi, Cesare Siepi, Keith Engen, Nikolai Gyaurov, Siegfried Vogel, Evgeny Nesterenko, Dmitry Petkov, Roger Soyer, and Samuel Ramey. And he certainly exercised what he could do as a basso cantante / basso profondo, all thanks to his wonderful performance as King Marke. With that voluminous voice of his that combined that cavernous depth as well as that virility that made him stand out tonight in the best way possible, I could see a brilliant future for Tareq Nazmi in roles such as Don Giovanni, Mephistopheles, Boris Godunov, both Dosife and Prince Ivan Kovansky, both Khan Konchak and Prince Galitsky, more performances as Philip II, Ramphis, Sparafucile, Procida, Silva, Colline, Marcel from Les Huguenots, Bertram from Robert le Diable, and maybe even one day Le Cardinal de Broglie from Alevis la Juive. He already sung Albert, so I think it is high time for Tareq Nazmi to conquer Le Cardinal de Broglie from La Juive. The possibilities for this awesome basso cantante / basso profondo are absolutely endless, and his voluminous voice and magnetic stage presence and overall formidable virility proved that he managed to shine like the brightest of stars tonight. And he is also quite up there with some of my most favorite singers for King Marke, such as Ferdinand Franz, Hans Hotter, Gottlob Frick, Kurt Böhme, Josef Greindl, Ludwig Weber, Ludwig Hofmann, Sven Nilsson, Manfred Schenk, Hans Sotin, Martti Talvela, Otto von Rohr, Matti Salminen, and lest I forget about Emanuel Liszt, Ezio Pinza, Alexander Kipnis, and Herbert Alsen. Those were the great basso profondos who also sang King Marke with sufficient depth, voluminousness, richness, and cavernousness that made them stand out in that particular role. Therefore, I still have to give my salutes and thousands of acclaims to Tareq Nazmi for a job outstandingly, let alone excellently done as King Marke. I definitely cannot wait to see what the future has for Mr. Nazmi in all of these great leading man roles. And here's also hoping that I see him in a lot more exciting roles to come. Thomas Lehmann absolutely surprised me as Corvinal. I never thought that a baritone who started out in a lot more of the lyrical roles over a decade ago managed to grow and flourish to singing a lot more dramatic baritone roles. And he definitely won me over as Kurvanal, all thanks to his superb musicianship and great timing as a singing actor. His trademark cavalier baritone / dramatic baritone voice soared throughout the orchestra like an eagle, flying above the air, about to capture its next prey. And he definitely won me over tonight as Kurvanal. His voice was also one of many colors of the palette, and one that has great shading in both the dark and the light. Thus, Thomas Lehmann was able to make a great use of his voice to be emotive and be totally involved with the music and the drama. What I also notice about Thomas Lehmann is that he is also following the similar paths set by Leonard Warren, Giuseppe Valdengo, Cheryl Milnes, and one of my personal favorite baritones of all time, Robert Merrill. In fact, I could definitely see and hear shades of Leonard Warren and Robert Merrill just emanating out of Thomas Lehmann's mouth. And there's also a great future for Thomas Lehmann in a lot of the Verdian roles, such as Miller from Luisa Miller, Don Carlo from both Hernani and La Forza del Destino, Rigoletto from Rigoletto, Il Conte di Luna, which I'm sure he already sung, and he's also been seeing a lot more performances of Giorgio Germont from La Traviata, and of course Monforte from Le Vepre Sicilien or I Vespri Siciliani, and maybe in the future I would also love to see him in roles such as Simon Boccanegra, Nabucco, Amfuatas, Donor Mandrica from Arabella, and the High Priest of Dagon from Sans Séance, Samson et Dalila. The possibilities for Thomas Lehmann are absolutely endless, and he totally surprised me tonight, all thanks to his strong sense of musicianship and his overall vocal formidability that made him win tonight. He may not have the overall darkness and overall depth, let alone that bass baritone depth found in the likes of Ferdinand Franz or Hans Hotter or even Gustav Neidlinger. But that's just an insignificant nitpick because Thomas Lehmann's musicianship managed to make him win an A+ for me tonight. And he did so by taking advantage of his great musicianship and totally making the role of Kurvanal his own. So I have to salute Thomas Lehmann for exceeding my expectations and doing so in a way that made him absolutely awesome as Kurvanal. Clay Hilly was in much stronger, much more formidable, and much greater shape tonight as Tristan. He also managed to surprise me, let alone overwhelm me, with how much he was able to keep on growing as a Heldentenor. His voice continues to radiate throughout the theater like comets blasting out of his mouth. And he also managed to just let his voice ring throughout the theater so well and do so in a way that made me involved with everything that he has been accomplishing thus far as a singing actor. His high notes were ringing and brilliant. His chest tones were full, thus making him an overall complete musician from beginning to end. Yes, I do miss the more baritonal voices found in Eiffel Laholm, Gunnar Grarud, Renato Zanelli, Lauritz Melchior, Max Lorenz, Setz Vanholm, Ludwig Suthaus, Gunther Treptow, Bernd Aldenhoff, Hans Beirer, Ramon Vinay, John Cox, John Vickers, and Claude Heater. And lest I forget about Spasvenkov. But regardless, I still confirm that Clay Hilly was an ace tonight as Tristan, all thanks to how he was able to make himself vocally present and totally involved in the drama, thus making him absolutely brilliant tonight and win so wonderfully as the main hero. Jörg Schörner is no stranger to the role of Milot, and yes, he sings the role effectively. Yes, he manages to make the best out of this character part. But if you know me, I always love it when a more virile, darker sounding, and more masculine sounding Heldentenor or dramatic tenor sings this role. And voices that come to my ears are the likes of Joachim Zottler, Emery Darcy, Edgar Evans, Hasso Eschot, Gunther Treptow, who was also a famous Tristan, Fritz Uhl, who I actually love him a lot more as Melot rather than Tristan, Ernst Kotzub, who is admittedly a steelier voiced Melot, more ideal for Tristan, Sebastian Feiersinger, Stanley Unruh, Warren Ellsworth, and lest I forget about James McCracken and my personal favorite Melot of all time, Claude Heater. But I totally digress because Jörg Schörner was still a dedicated singing actor who managed to make the best out of Melot and how thankless this part is. But at the end of the day, I've always preferred it when a richer and darker sounding Heldentenor tackles Melot. You know, the type of tenor who can sing Sigmund, Erik, and Lohengrin, as well as the likes of Don Alvaro from La Forza del Destino, and even Cavaradossi from Tosca. Nevertheless, Jörg Schörner was in absolutely fine form and managed to make the best out of Melot. Jared Wehrlein was a virile and strong and handsome steersman, all thanks to his voice that also reminds me a bit of Samuel Ramey in his younger years, and here he is exercising his strong technique and doing so in a way that made me salute him. He is quite up there with some personal favorite steersmen, such as Gerd Nienstedt and Theo Adam. So bravo to Jared Wehrlein for making the best out of the steersmen. Kang Yoon Shine Lee was in absolutely brilliant form as the young sailor. His voice radiated throughout the theater with beauty, masculinity, and great musicianship from top to bottom. His voice was so even and so pure that I could never, ever take my eyes and ears off of how he was able to produce such golden tones. And while I do love a much richer voice, let alone a more manly voice, found in the likes of Josef Troxel, Walter Geisler, and Rudolf Schock, I could still give a whole lot of credit and kudos to Kang Yoon Shine Lee for his brilliant portrayal of the young sailor with great musicianship and a whole lot of vocal beauty to offer this particularly small but absolutely wonderful role. Clemens Bieber continues to have the vocal goods as the shepherd, all thanks to his trademark light lyric tenor voice. It's a voice that managed to still be consistent with its great musicianship and great vocal acting, and it is astounding to hear Mr. Bieber sound completely fresh, completely well-tuned. He is in absolutely great form as the shepherd, as well as using his superb musicianship to make the shepherd a very involving character, and he is also quite up there with some personal favorites such as Georg Pascuda, Gerhard Stolze, and Gerhard Unger. So he is in absolutely amazing form, and his vocal resources continue to be as strong as ever. Irene Roberts definitely flourished as Brangena, and I would even argue that this is one of her best roles that she has done thus far. What I've been hearing in Irene Roberts is that she has a great top. Yes, there are times that her voice tends to be a bit on the uneven side, and there are times that she can sound a little bit on the squally side, but I could forgive whatever issue that Miss Roberts had because she managed to take great advantage of a good deal of her chest tones as well as her head voice, let alone her coordinated chest voice, and make the role of Branghena her own. She was able to play up the youth, the girlishness, the sensitivity, and the overall nervousness that she has in any scenario that she's in, whether she's warning Isolde or trying to console Isolde in all of those dramatic outbursts. And the other thing I've also heard in Irene Roberts' voice is that she could also be a lot more in tune with the more Falcon roles. I would definitely love to hear her as Sieglinde from Die Walküre, Chimène from Lucide, Thérèse from Massenet's Thérèse, Prezzosilla from La Forza del Destino, and maybe even more Giuliettas from Le Comte of Man, and hopefully one day Santuzza from Cavalleria Rusticana because of her easy and absolutely amazing top notes. Yes, she may not be the chestiest or the richest voice of Branghena's, the ones that I've always appreciated in singers such as Kerstin Thorborg, Margrethe Klose, Evestignani, Elena Nicolai, Elisabeth Höngen, Elsa Cavelti, Nell Rankin, Irene Dallas, Rita Gore, Christa Ludwig, Gisela Schröter, Josephine Vesey, Ruth Hesse, Yvonne Minton, and even natural sopranos such as Fiorizza Ursuleas, Annie Helm, and Catherine Harries. Those singers had way more coordinated chest tones and way more focused tones that made Branghena an absolutely awesome and totally brilliant character, especially where the likes of Christa Ludwig was concerned. And I consider Christa Ludwig to be the queen of all Branghenas, because she has that youthfulness in her voice, but also that ethereal gloriousness that made her absolutely beautiful to listen to. And in terms of the next singer that I consider to be one of the best Branghenas of all time, Grace Hoffman, and her absolutely wonderful sense of musicianship. And lest I forget about the likes of Ira Malaniuk and Georgina von Milinkovic, whose voices managed to combine richness and roundness in Malaniuk's case with that soprano-ish tone that still managed to make Branghena tackle the high notes in von Milinkovic's case. So these were mezzo-sopranos and even sopranos to some extent that managed to own the role of Branghena, complete with good chest tones and blazing top notes. I still have to give credit to Irene Roberts for what she was able to accomplish as Branghena, and I cannot wait to see what future lies ahead of her in terms of tackling roles such as Sieglinde from Die Walküre and maybe even Chimène from Massenet's Lucide. The possibilities for Miss Roberts are absolutely endless, and she managed to take advantage of her almost Falcon-like voice to make the role of Branghena work effectively. It should be no surprise that I have been having mixed feelings with Ricarda Meyerbeer tackling all of these big dramatic soprano roles. Look no further than my experiences with her singing Elektra from Richard Strauss's Elektra. Sure, what I've heard tonight is her tackling those chest tones with boldness and sufficient richness, as well as great effect to make Isolde a poignant and truly dramatic character, and one worth constantly listening to, all thanks to how she was able to make those chest tones just flow with theatrical effect. However, there were also times that she forgot to use a lot more chestiness when she sang the low A in terms of receiving the potion, the supposed death potion. And the other Achilles heel with Ricarda Meyerbeer these days is the constant wobbling and shrillness that have been marring her voice ever since she's been taking on these bigger, more dramatic soprano roles. Nevertheless, she still had reliable top notes, but good chest tones and reliable top notes were never really enough to make Ricarda Mirbit a totally effective Isolde. Yes, she has the great theatricality. Yes, she's got decent musicianship. Yes, she's worked hard at making the role her own, especially with a good chunk of lyricism. But what I've been hearing in her voice is that her voice has been suffering a bit too much mileage and sounded labored given the tremolos and wobbles that I have been hearing in her voice ever since taking on these more dramatic soprano roles. It says something that natural mezzo-sopranos such as Emmy Kruger, Margaret Halstead, Mina Bolotine, Elsa Cavelti, and Irene Dallas had way more coordinated chest tones and way richer tones when they were singing Isolde, especially where Irene Dallas sang Isolde back in 1967 at the San Francisco Opera House. It also says something that mezzo-sopranos such as Rita Gore, Krista Ludwig, and even Eva Randova sang the Liebestod complete with chest tones and beautifully blazing top notes, despite the fact that they were more well known in the mezzo-soprano repertoire. It definitely says something when blazingly awesome dramatic sopranos complete with great chest tones and brilliant high notes, such as Frida Leider, Kirsten Flagstad, Helen Traubel, Johanna Gadsky, Gertrud Kapell, Christelle Goltz, Gertrud Grob-Prandl, Birgit Nilsson, Gwyneth Jones, Hildegard Behrens, and Brenda Roberts had those in spades and also sang this role to dramatic effect, especially where the likes of Frida Leider, Kirsten Flagstad, Helen Traubel, Gertrud Grob-Prandl, Birgit Nilsson, Gwyneth Jones, and Hildegard Behrens are concerned. It also says something that singers specializing in both dramatic soprano and dramatic mezzo roles, such as Helene Wildbrunn, Edith Walker, Margareta Matzenauer, Anna von Mildenburg, Martha Fuchs, Gertrud Rünger, Annika Netzny, Helena Braun, Erna Schlüter, Margaret Harshaw, Marjorie Lawrence, Martha Mödel, although she was more of a high mezzo-soprano who also tackled dramatic soprano roles, but then reverted back to dramatic mezzo roles in the 1960s, but still was an involving singer from bottom to top in terms of her notes and in terms of her acting. Rossi Deli, Gerda Lammers, Astrid Varnay, Suzanne Juyol, Ludmila Vorakova, Amy Sheward, Ingrid Steger, Sigrid Kehl, Nadezhda Kniplova, Danica Mastilovitz, Janice Martin, Isolde Eichlerb, and Gabriele Schnaut also had those great chest tones and more, especially those great dramatic sopranos also specializing in dramatic mezzo-soprano roles in the past, from Edith Walker to Astrid Varnay to Ludmila Vorakova. And if you want blazing top notes, look no further than Amy Sheward all the way up to Gabriele Schnaut in her glorious prime. Those were real singers from the mezzo-sopranos to the dramatic sopranos who tackled Isolde, chest tones, high notes, middle range, and that strength needed to sing over the orchestra and more. And we got vocal miracles like Birgit Nilsson singing up a storm as Isolde, all thanks to how she mastered her craft so beautifully from bottom to top. It definitely says something. And even with Martha Mödel's more smoky register being put to fantastic use as Isolde, and Astrid Varnay's metal also being just as great. With Ricarda Mirbit, she still kind of fell short of the demands needed for making Isolde function well. But she still showed dedication and chutzpah and guts at making Isolde her own, and did so in a way that made her an involving singing actress, even with her vocal goods being rather shaky here and there. So overall, the singing to varying degrees was quite amazing, especially from Tareq Nazmi, managing to make a strong impression on me as King Marke, all thanks to his exceptional vocal growth an absolute virility in this role. He definitely grew and came into his own as a singer, and I salute him for what he was able to offer. I also have to give major kudos to Thomas Lehmann for also singing extremely well as Kurvana and even surprising me in this role. He definitely won me over tonight, and he continues to do so with every subsequent performance. And lest I forget about the efforts accomplished by Clay Hilly, Jörg Schörner, Jared Wehrlein, Kang Yunshine Lee, Clemens Biba, Irene Roberts, and Ricarda Mirbit. They all managed to do fine jobs all throughout, but more than anybody, it was Tareq Nazmi and Thomas Lehmann who stole the show altogether. The conducting done by Peter Popelka managed to be nuanced and sufficiently exciting. Yes, there could have been a little bit more nuance and a lot more colors being used in the overture, but he was still extremely engaging with the orchestra. And yes, I could have loved to have a lot more nuance in the instrumentation found in conductors such as Wilhelm Furtwängler and Karl Böhm, as well as my personal favorite, Herbert von Karajan, but Mr. Popelka managed to do a fine job whipping up that orchestra, and the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin were, as always, absolutely amazing from beginning to end. Tareq Nazmi managed to win me over tonight as King Marke. His vocal growth from starting out in a great chunk of character-based roles to singing more leading male roles managed to make him an absolutely brilliant singing actor. He stole the show from nearly everybody's feet and did so with great musicianship, great involvement with his craft, as well as consistently polishing his craft to deliver some amazing performances. Joining alongside him was Thomas Lehmann, who managed to surprise me in the most exciting way possible as Kurvanal, and do so in a way that made me consistently root for whatever performance he has coming up. His voice also grew with virility and strength, as well as his repertoire. So the future is definitely looking bright for both Tareq Nazmi and Thomas Lehmann, respectively, as King Marke and Kurvanal. So bravo to the both of them, and here's also hoping that more exciting roles will come along their way. And for those of you who caught this performance of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, directed by Sir Graham Vick at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Tareq Nazmi stole the show as King Marke? Did you also feel that Thomas Lehmann did a superb job as Kurvanal? Did you also feel that both Tareq Nazmi and Thomas Lehmann stole the show as King Marke and Kurvanal respectively? Was there another singer who stole the show from both Tareq Nazmi's and Thomas Lehmann's feet? Or did you feel like the singing was not really to your liking? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, starring Tareq Nazmi as King Marke. Tune in tomorrow for my review, let alone my tribute to Power Rangers Zeo's A Mystery to Me. It may not be considered as a Halloween episode, but it's pretty close to me. So until then, good night everybody.